buying favor does not mean that you're networking with people transactionally, but it does mean that when you are networking, it should be with intention. And that intention is not that, oh, I'm going to cash in on this favor in the future. It's buying favor in the sense that I know if I pour into enough people, that's going to come back to me one way or another.
What is up, Growth House family? This is Jesse Ray. I am here with my friend Tessa Bella. How are you doing?
I am doing great. And just as you said, Jesse Ray, my friends in high school used to call me Tessa Bay. So that would have been a perfect rhyme had we coordinated Tessa Bay and Jesse Ray. But I am
We
happy.
might have to put that in the new intro, Jesse Ray and Tessa Bay.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I want people to kind of know a little bit about your background, so I'm going to read off a little bit about you. So Tessa Bella, 10-year marketing strategist, real estate coach, transforming the industry with your unique approach to branding, lead generation, digital presence, and empowering real estate professionals around the nation. I want to dive into that sounds good, by the way, what your bio is. Before we really get into all of that, what's a fun fact about you?
A fun fact about me, I truly have so many. I'm like a box of tricks. It's kind of crazy. But a fun fact that always blows people away is I played rugby for years, and I was actually on the U.S. women's national rugby team for a very brief moment before I freaking shattered my leg.
Oh my gosh, I did not see that coming.
Yeah, see? Nobody does. That's a big fun fact.
That's awesome. So that was like your main passion growing up, was rugby?
Honestly, no. I played golf and rugby, which was a weird combination. Rugby started for me in high school. Like I probably was a freshman in high school. I started and it was one of those things that I was just naturally really good at. Not to toot my own horn, but like people were always like, whoa, this is kind of crazy. And so I pursued that. And I thought that was going to be a path I would even take further. You know, if you're good in women's sports, it's pretty, I don't want to say easy, but like you have a lot more opportunities because the pool of people is bigger, especially when it's kind of an obscure sport like that where it's not super popular. So yeah, I was going to kind of go all the way with that. But then I was also like, I'm getting pummeled by giant girls every day. I don't think this can last very long for me. I just don't think it can. So.
I was going to say, like, I don't see someone as like aggressive and going to crush girls.
Not at all. To be fair, I was the position that is most commonly compared to as like a football quarterback. So in most cases, I was not somebody who would get hit too often. But yeah, I mean, you're wearing zero protective gear other than a mouth guard. So if you do get hit, you're getting trucked.
Dang, that's impressive. I did not know that about you. That is a fun fact.
Yes.
So let's dive into your story. So you got started in real estate pretty young. I think you dropped out of college. Is that right?
I did. Yeah. I got started in real estate like this. I graduated high school, moved to Arizona, and I started working at Dutch Bros, quickly moved into being a manager at a Dutch Bros. Also thought that might be my path for my future is to like own Dutch Bros and like franchise and all that jazz. And all the while I was like, I would watch so much HGTV every time I had downtime. I was like, this is so cool. And it was right when those flipping shows were starting to take off. So like the show Flip or Flop, I was just starting to see that pop on. And I was like obsessed with this concept of it. And so I went and dug around and found whatever I could to figure out how to do it. And I ended up, like, to make the longest story short, I ended up making a presentation and I started just pitching myself to just about anyone who would listen, which in hindsight was so funny because I'm naturally a pretty introverted person, but I have adopted the phrase and love the phrase, everyone has something that makes them an instant extrovert. And so I very quickly realized that real estate was this thing that I'm like, all of a sudden I am this extrovert. I can talk about it. I can teach about it. I can pitch about it. I can do anything when it comes to real estate. Anything else, I'm like, oh, please don't talk to me. But something about that, it just made me, have this boldness about me. So I dove right into real estate. Like, yeah, when I was 18.
That's amazing. So you were already looking to raise money and fund deals like right out the bat.
Yeah, well, because I mean, I had literally no money. Like, I genuinely, and I have a screenshot. There's so many little screenshots or videos that I'm so grateful I kept. There's also a ton I know I deleted because at the time it would be embarrassing. So, for anyone listening, if there's something right now you're going through that's embarrassing, like a low bank account, like take that screenshot and save it because you'll be so glad you did. Because I do have a screenshot of the day I got the keys to the first property I ever flipped. I had negative 36 cents in my bank account. And I was like, all right, well, here we go. We're going to do it. And I learned really quickly when it, at least in the terms of real estate investing, like you can either bring the knowledge, the effort, and like the actual skill set of doing it or the money. And I was like, I know that I've got sweat equity. I don't know what I'm doing yet and I don't have the money, but I will work harder than absolutely anybody else. And so that was what I could bring to the table. And few people were willing to take a chance on that, I guess.
That's amazing. So what happened? Like, because how old were you when you started?
I was probably, I just turned 19.
Okay. So no
Yeah.
excuse out there for people.
No excuse. No excuse. You know, I always talk about though, because like, I mean, I don't know if you've ever experienced this. I experienced business, especially entrepreneurship, is very cyclical. You've had your years where I'm like, I'm freaking rolling in it, I'm crushing it. And then there's years where you're like, I am a loser and I should probably go get a job. Like, what was I thinking? I've had all of those years and everything in between. And I definitely feel like when you're starting out, I had nothing to lose. Like as mentioned, I had so little money that I was like, there's not much further down I could go in this situation. And it almost made it feel easier because I was like, I've never had the taste of the good stuff yet. So I don't even know. I just have this fantasy of what it's going to look like, feel like, smell like, sound like, but I don't know that yet. Once you felt it and then you don't have it anymore, it's almost harder to get there the second time. And I don't know. I think there's probably a lot of like the psychological stuff to unpack there, but that's something I believe strongly. So yeah, at the time I was like, I've got nothing to lose. So we might as well try.
Back against the wall, you're like, I got to make it happen.
Yeah.
No
Let's
other
do
option. There's no plan B.
it. 100%.
So how long did it take to get your first deal? And then walk me through that kind of journey of, because I know you didn't just start with, raising capital and then you're now
No,
doing all
actually,
kinds of things.
I've always, well, and don't take my advice on real estate investing because, like, I did do quite a bit of it, but I certainly am not the one to coach on it. But what I did is I put together this super cool PowerPoint presentation. That was what I thought was going to seal the deal. And I was like, I need to talk to anyone who has money. And working at my Dutch Bros job, somebody who was a regular of ours would come through and I was telling her what I wanted to do. And she was like, oh, I know this guy, he's got money. He's like in the Midwest. And I was like, okay. I mean, has money could be $10 or 20 billion. I have no idea. But I was like, sure. We got on a Skype call and I went through all my slides, like pitching him this concept of like investing in real estate just based off of what I learned from HGTV. And I would like go on these forums online and I found this like pirated version of Fortune Builders by Than Merrill. It was like someone had like recorded the screen recording of the actual coaching calls and put it up on this like blacklist forum. And I would watch it and learn what I needed to know. And I got this guy to say yes, that he would fund it if he basically told me, which was a valuable lesson. He said, if you find a deal, the money is the easiest part. And so he essentially said, yes, I will fund it, but like find a deal. So then I just had to go out and find a deal. And again, at the time, that was like 2015. So downtown Central Phoenix, it was easy to find a deal because like properties in that old historic area, you could find something that was really run down that hadn't been taken over in a long time, had an older or absentee owner, and you could buy that thing for like $75,000, $80,000, flip it, and then sell it for $275,000, $300,000. Like that was really possible there. And so that was what I did with my first one. I found this property that I ended up remodeling, but as I went through that process, I quickly learned I probably should have just torn it down because it had so much termite damage. Like you could have blown it and it would have fallen over. I ended up only keeping just a corner of the entire property in the remodel. So it's pretty much a brand new house.
But look at you, you got started. You got creative and you got started. And I think that's the biggest thing for anyone listening that's new. It's just like, you're not going to have a home run on your first deal.
Yeah, no,
Literally
definitely
just get
not a
started.
home run. I mean, I actually was fortunate enough to come out with a small profit even after pretty much every mistake you can make and every like issue you can possibly imagine, and even the ones you can't. Like, we had got the house under contract, and I had the inspector go in that day. We were like, oh, it's finally about to happen. And the inspector calls me in the morning and is like, hey, do you guys have a lockbox on this property? I was like, yeah, it's on the hose bib. Like, duh, kind of everyone says. He's like, no, is there somewhere else it might be? And I'm kind of like walking him through it. And he's like, is it this smashed one over here in the corner? And I'm like, oh no. So somebody had smashed our lockbox, got the keys. The back of the house had like the accordion doors or like pocket doors. They had reversed a truck and just cleaned out the house. Every appliance gone, every single thing that you could take of value wiped. And luckily that didn't spook the buyer too much. We just replaced it and kept the transaction going. But I was like, that was a brutal final blow right before you close. Yeah, it was
Yeah, if I
crazy.
was a buyer, I would be like, yeah, this house just got robbed right when
Yeah.
I'm about to buy it. I'm out. I'm good.
I
It's a
know.
terrible
I
neighborhood.
wouldn't blame them, but luckily they stayed and we got the deal done because, yeah, that was quite the story. I said, what kind of other experience? That was another thing. I was like, that means the next one's going to be easier, right? But I mean, in ways it was, in ways it wasn't. That's kind of the fun of real estate, is every deal's different. So I guess it's whatever you consider fun.
Well, I don't know if you had the same mentality maybe that you do now, but my mentality when things just go wrong, I'm like, you know what? My tests become my testimony. And like I
Yes.
almost get excited. Like when I had my not roof, but ceiling cave in at my other house, I was just like, this is actually kind of funny now. Like if
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it zooming out like 3 years from now, I'm gonna tell the story about how my ceiling collapsed when I
Oh,
had
yeah.
all these people living in it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
No,
I
it's
definitely
so true. And it's funny because when you're in the moment, like even anyone listening right now, you hear that, you're in that moment right now, you're like, screw them. That's not funny. Nothing about this is fun and enjoyable. It does become fun and enjoyable when you look back on it and you're able to see like the blessings and the positive of everything. And I think as you grow and as you experience more of those, that muscle becomes stronger. You can see the blessing in it much faster. You can see the good side in it much faster. Previously, like, yeah, when I had that negative 36 cents in my bank account, I was doing everything I could to hide the fact that that was my reality. I didn't want a single person to know that. Now I'm like, I've used that screenshot on stages. I'll tell people that. But at the time, I was like, this is awful. And it took me a while to turn that into the testimony. But then now it's like when something bad happens, it's much of a faster cycle to see, okay, no, there's the blessing in it, or there's the way I can really use this in my story, or there's what was actually protecting me from maybe something worse or presenting something better.
so good. Before we dive more into your marketing journey, how you got started, in the marketing space with real estate, a lot of people right now, one of my friends, Brian Lubin, is like, guys, document your journey, especially if you're just starting off. And it sounds like that's why you wish you would have had those
Yes.
screenshots, those videos
Yes.
of maybe you had to like, live out of your car for a day or two or some
Oh,
janky
I've got one
apartment.
of those too. I do have one of those.
So
I've
man,
honestly
Tessa,
got
you've
some
got it all. You've lived a
I've
lot
got
of
some
life.
good stuff. There's just more that I'm like, I know I deleted at times that I should have kept, but in reality, I have some bangers out there that are pretty good. My other favorite is, for the longest time when I got into being like a traditional real estate sales agent, my car had no AC. And so I was out showing houses in the middle of the summer, and it was so hot. My car would overheat. Sometimes I'd have to pull over for a little. I had to plan that into my drive time places because I was like, oh, I know we're going to have an overheat situation. And what I would do is I'd go to a gas station and I would get this bag of ice, like those big, I don't know how many pounds, 10-pound bag of ice, and just sit it on my lap and drive with it to keep myself cool enough so that when I show up to the showing, I'm not like dripping sweat. And so I don't know what made me think to do it, but I took a photo of myself one time in that situation and I still have that photo. And I'm like, I love looking back at that photo now. It's so funny to see that that was my reality at one point. Was I was driving like a little hoopty with no AC with a big bag of ice on my
I can
lap.
s- I can
Oh
say I've
my God.
never heard that one. That's different.
Yeah, that was, I mean, see, I've always been creative. I'm a problem solver.
I love it. Well, yeah, walk me through that journey. So, how'd you even get started with the marketing aspect of things?
Yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of it was timing. I'll always give credit to timing. So, as I was getting into real estate, like I said, I started more on the flipping side, the investment side. I really immersed myself in the network and the community of people in the real estate world in Phoenix, which is amazing. I know you know that firsthand, but like there's so many incredible people in real estate in Arizona. And as that like specific historic downtown Phoenix area started to get really inundated with investors, it was getting harder and harder to find properties with like enough meat on the bone to split it up amongst partners and all that kind of stuff. And I had been documenting the process the whole time, but right around, I want to say it was 2016, maybe 2017 is when Instagram stories came out. And I was like, oh yeah, this is my jam. I'm like, this is going to be it. Because as mentioned, I loved HGTV. So I said, my Instagram stories are going to be like my reality TV show. Like this is Tessa Bella's reality TV show. And I started documenting everything. And that quickly got me noticed just like locally. I got asked to come do classes at different real estate brokerages, like teach other people how to do it, teach other people Instagram. It also naturally attracted agents who wanted to work with me. It attracted leads. It attracted investors who wanted to work with me. It became this like true Instagram funnel. And I didn't even intend for it to. It just was that I was doing it. I was kind of learning it as I was going. And so what started as just doing it for free, as these free classes, then turned into managing a few people's accounts for free. And then that kind of evolved into ultimately an agency where we ran a bunch of social media accounts for like real estate and real estate related services. And the full circle moment is I ended up running Tarek El Musa's social media for about 3.5, 4 years. So the guy from Flipper Flop, from HGTV, that got me into real estate, he was my client. And I was like, that is some cool full circle moment stuff.
That's amazing. Okay, so it really all started, you say, like 2019.
It was about 2017 is when I started sharing a bunch. 2018, I probably started doing all the classes and speaking at a few things. And then, yeah, I started collecting clients in like end of 2018 and ran that through 2022.
Got it. And then 2022 to now, what does that look like?
Well, I did take a short and dumb hiatus where this is a good lesson, I guess, for entrepreneurs. There was like, I met some really cool people through Clubhouse actually. And I don't know if there really even is a proper vetting process for people other than if you trust that they're good people. There was always something in my gut that felt a little off about these people, but the numbers, the lifestyle, it all looked so good. And so they had kind of come to me with this opportunity and this like business that they were building. They wanted to build it, scale it, sell it, all this kind of stuff. And I was hesitant initially. And then I was like, you know what? I mean, at one point I was like, this is the money's coming in. We were doing like $250,000 a week and it was crazy. So I went all in on that. It was rank and rent websites. So we called it digital real estate. So we just repackaged it as something else. And the concept is great. It actually outgrew itself, I think. I think their downfall was greedy people who ran it, who didn't really care about the people who put money into it. And then I think they outsold themselves. It's like they brought on too many clients too quickly because our initial results were insane. You go from 50 clients to over 3,000 clients in a matter of like 4 months. You cannot deliver the same quality of services. And because they were cashing such big checks, they didn't really care. Yeah, so it was a brutal experience because I'm somebody that I'm like, I would give my freaking left arm to take care of my clients. Like I would do anything to make sure that people are getting what they paid for. And so when you're that person who just works for a company instead of it being your company, you've given up that ability. And I did whatever I could, but it was like hard. So took a little hiatus, all while still doing some real estate coaching and always kind of staying in the world. But that was going to be my sail off into the sunset ticket. That was a big swing and a miss, but it's okay because I quickly got right back into the real estate world and reminded me why I never probably should have left in the first place.
Well, walk me through because I think this is huge. And this is what,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, yeah, we're talking about marketing, social media, Instagram. What is it? It's really just a highlight reel for the most part, which I think you have strategies where you share actually your journey. So it's not all sunshine and rainbows. But for most people, everyone's doing amazing. Everyone's a millionaire. If you're not successful after 6 months starting something, you're a loser. Like that's like it's all pushed in your face, right?
Yep.
But the reality is we have a lot of L's that we don't show publicly.
Oh yeah.
Not losses, maybe it is, but more of a learning lesson. So for you, what was your biggest learning lesson when it comes to maybe let's say partnerships like after that situation?
Yeah, I think honestly, a really big one for me is there are different credentials that'll matter to different people. To be honest with you, I don't care too much about somebody's actual credentials of like, what, for instance, what college you went to or how much money you made previously or any of those kind of things. Like, obviously, depending on what the business is, those can matter somewhat. But to me, I'm like, as long as you're actually aligned with people who have the same morals and you know, okay, let's always play out the worst case scenario. And this is something Ramon and I talk about all the time is it's like, okay, so everything can look good and feel good and sound good when life is amazing. But the reality is no matter who you are, you're going to have those cycles where it's not, where something happens and some things are worse than others. But like, how is that person going to react? And how is that person going to respond when like shit hits the fan? I don't know if I can curse on here. You might have to bleep me, but I apologize. When beef hits the fan, I mean, you need to have people behind you that you know would also stay up for 4 days straight fixing it, would also refund people out of their own damn pockets if that's what it came down to. Like those are the kind of people. And so that was my biggest lesson is I need to spend more time vetting people based on their true morals and characteristics. There's only so much of what you can do until you're actually in those situations. You pray you don't get in those situations. I do believe in trusting your intuition, spending time with people face to face, you can pretty quickly pick up on like, okay, this person's like, this is a real one, or this is somebody who's like, not somebody I would partner with, to put it as nicely as I can.
So true, because in what I do with the masterminds by doing the hosting the private dinners, probably the main reason people just come no matter what day I say, like, hey, we're doing it this day, they're like, I'm there because it's a pre-vetted selection. And I go through that process to make sure there are the right people, good people in those rooms, in those environments. And 100%, like you said, for me, it's integrity and values, I guess character too. It's kind of a little bit of the same, but those three before whatever, I don't care how successful you are.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with you there.
Yeah. Because also the success can happen overnight. I mean, obviously not truly overnight, but like the money and those kind of metrics, if that's what you're measuring your relationships off of, that can both happen very quickly and be lost very quickly. So instead, I would like to measure my relationships off of the elements and the credentials that can't change overnight or that I know won't change overnight.
So good. We're staying on this topic for a while because it's one of my favorite topics right here. Obviously, I want to talk about neighborhood. I want to talk about, Rock Realty, but let's stay here because I think in your bio, you also mentioned like strategic networking. I think that was something that, yeah, strategic networking. So talk to me. What is strategic networking?
Yes, there's actually a concept I teach real estate agents and blows their mind every time. I call that one strategic partnerships, but it really is. And funny enough, I just introduced you to a friend of mine who is incredible and has taught me so much about this. The first time him and I ever met, the bougiest story, we were like on a private jet to Cabo because we were going to this mastermind. But when you meet those people and like within the first exchange, you're like, okay, that's going to be one of my homies, like for life. Like there's something that's different there. He was telling me this story that has stuck out to me forever. And this is how I now believe strategic networking should act. And it's called buying favor. And there's a right and wrong way that you need to understand this because buying favor does not mean that you're networking with people transactionally, but it does mean that when you are networking, it should be with intention. And that intention is not that, oh, I'm going to cash in on this favor in the future. It's buying favor in the sense that I know if I pour into enough people, that's going to come back to me one way or another. That may not be in the way that I imagine it, but it will absolutely feed my life and my people in the future, even if it's extremely indirectly. And so he has this whole concept about buying favor. And I relate that very closely to strategic networking. It's just making sure that I'm not just going to networking events just to show up. If I'm going to go, I'm going to make sure I'm the best version of myself, that I want people to recognize me for who I am and what I can bring. And so, I speak at a lot of conferences and usually at conferences, there's always the like mixer, like the VIP thing, all the other stuff. A lot of times I don't go to those, or I will go to them for a brief period of time. And it's only because I want to make sure that the entire time I'm exposing myself to people, that they're going to get the best version of myself. And if I was just up on stage for an hour giving my everything to a presentation and I'm exhausted and I've been wearing freaking high heels all day, I know that me going to a networking event is not going to be people experiencing the way I want them to remember me and know me. So I'd rather be absent from that than to show up not my best self, if that makes sense.
So good. I love it. Talk to me about, because we always hear like you provide other people value, right? What's some ways that you see yourself when you get introduced or you're, try to connect with someone? And it's not like you're connecting with someone, like you said, transactionally, but just like, I want to build this relationship. Who knows what could happen? What's some ways that you provide value for others?
Well, honestly, and Jesse Itzler has a way that he talks about this that's like so much more articulate than the way I'm about to say it, but I'll give the ghetto version probably, is value doesn't always have to be teaching them something or introducing them to something. Sometimes, in fact, almost more often than not, the value actually comes in how you make somebody feel. So you exchanging value or providing value could be just that you're at a networking event and you're not checking your phone at all. You are engaged in the conversation. You remember the last time you met them. You remember that you connected on social and you saw that their kid just got sick and they're now like, recovering from something. And it could be that you just are truly showing like that human characteristic. And I think now more than ever in our world of like evolving technology, that is probably one of the highest forms of value you can exchange with a lot of people. So that's one way that I try to, is like my phone stays on do not disturb, which is another reason I'm not a practicing realtor anymore, is because I'm like, I love do not disturb.
Don't call Tessa for a showing.
Do not be calling me for a showing because I will not answer. But all jokes aside, I always like to really be present when I'm with people as much as I can. I think that's a big exchange of value. And then, extracting from conversation or from interactions ways that you can add value and introduce them to people in relevant ways. And so pretty much every time I interact with somebody, I try to really observe them. And sometimes it's not even the conversation. It's just observing like their mannerisms and how they interact. You can typically infer or make some positive assumptions of how you might be able to add value to them. And then I think the last piece of value, which goes very underrated, is vulnerability. Reaching out to somebody and being really vulnerable. Like a great example, I recently reached out to a friend of mine and I was super vulnerable in the fact that I was saying like, I'm somebody who has been a Christian my whole life. I have a calling right now to deepen my relationship with God and my faith. And that's a vulnerable ask because a lot of people wear their faith as like a token of, accomplishment. And it's hard to admit if you're not like the standard that you want to be at. It'd be the same thing as going to somebody and asking for coaching, asking for help. That's showing vulnerability. And I think that's really valuable and deepens a relationship to a whole new level with somebody. And again, will pay off in the future.
So good. Yeah, that vulnerability piece is something that this past year I've seen because, especially guys, we
Yeah.
don't be vulnerable.
Yeah.
But when you are with the right people and you're around the right environment, like that's how you get close with people quick.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I love that you said all those things. I think the number one way you show up in a room, bring energy. It's the easiest way where people just will remember you because you're positive and you have energy. If
Yep.
nothing else, that's the easiest way to provide value to someone because people want those type of people in their life.
Yes.
So I feel like that's kind of what you were.
Energy is so palpable. Like I could get so woo-woo on stuff. I won't go too far, but like
Well, give us a little woo. Go ahead. Go ahead.
just a little tinge of woo-woo. Like people can feel if you are giving off genuinely feeling like, hey, I'm interested in this conversation. Or if you're kind of like you're there and you're doing the fake nod, but like you're almost glossed over. That's probably a visual example of it. But like energy goes so much deeper and people can really feel that whether they know it or not. You can tell, like, also, especially people you spend a lot of time with, like Ramon and I are together all the time. I can tell, I'm like, your anxiety just went up a little, like, what just happened? And he's like, oh yeah, I did just get this text about like a deal and this something and like an agent needs this. And like, you can start to feel other people's energy the more that you tune into it. So in terms of networking, like trying to make sure that you bring the best you can into those settings, even if that means you're there for a shorter period of time, or if you have to step away for a minute and like reset. Cause I am an empath through and through. through. So like I absorb other people's energies a lot. And if I'm somewhere and like somebody just felt the need to like share their deepest, darkest thing with me, I need to take a second and step outside and like reset that because I absorbed their intense energy. And so it's important to like just feel those things and be able to understand where to take it from there so that you don't take that negativity and like project it anywhere else.
So true. And I think what you just mentioned about like, you don't have to be there the whole time.
Yeah.
That's something else I've started to do personally where I'm like, I don't need to be there from 5 to 7. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's no need
No.
to linger.
Yeah.
So, and then the
Well, and
last,
that's
go
kind of a
ahead.
piece of value too, is like showing up for the people who show up for you. And I think that's something that's really important. There's times where like I'm invited to something and in my heart of hearts, I'm like, I would much rather sit on the couch and watch something and like order pizza or something. But that's somebody that I know is important to me, or they're important to somebody who's important to me. And so it's important that I show up. And I think that in itself is an exchange of value, is your physical presence there. So like we talked about being tuned in when you're there, but yeah, even if you just pop in for 10 minutes, that effort is like goes a long way, and people remember when the people who showed up for them, especially in those times where it's not popping. People show up when you're crushing it. But when it's like my first event and I have 3 people there and like they're pretty much all work for me and you show up to that, like that's something I would never ever forget. And so whenever you have those opportunities, even if it is just popping in for 5 minutes, it goes way farther than you probably would ever realize.
Yes. And I hate to do this right now, but what about for you, since you're someone that, people want to be around, they want to learn from you, come be on this stage, come here, market this for me. What about saying no? How has that been over the last few years, and especially as your brand has blown up?
I've gotten better at saying no. I historically was somebody who had a hard time with saying no. And I think a lot of times I am always honest, but I like to ask for people's permission to be transparent. So like if somebody asked me to be a part of, let's just say, an event, and it's something and they're like, hey, we want you to come out here, fly out to this thing, but I gotta be honest, we have no budget to work with. So like you have to do it all this kind of stuff. I know myself at this point, I won't say no to all of those, but like those don't always fit into what's realistic for me and my brand. And so I always start by just asking people's permission. And a friend of mine who often coaches with me on calls, he taught me this concept called EAC. It's expectation, agreement, and then consequence. And so when you're setting a boundary or when you're saying no to something, you set that expectation of just, hey, like, do I have your permission to be transparent with you? Totally. I'm a straight shooter. I set the expectation. I'd love to come. At the very least, I would need my flight and room covered, or whatever your expectation is. Get them to verbally agree to it and then say it. And if that's not possible, no worries. I'll still support you in another way, whether that's on social media or whatever it is. But if you don't respect that and you still expect this of me, this would be the consequence. And so I think that same principle can be applied with just about anything you need to set a boundary with or say no to, is the expectation, getting them to agree to it, and then that they know there's a consequence if they don't.
I've never heard that, but I'm clipping that up. That's a master class right
There
there.
you go. That's your clip.
So I told you off camera, but there's someone that I love dearly, and I just met him this past year. That's Ramon.
Mhm.
Ramon's literally like one of my favorite people now, and I'm like thinking about, I'm like, I've only known this guy for like a year, and it's just so cool when you just find those people that are now in your inner circle in your life. And so you are working with Ramon on filming in.
Yes.
So you're part of the coaching program with his
Yes.
team.
It's actually so funny because Ramon and I have been in a relationship now for almost 3 years. And we also, for a while, we were like, okay, we're not going to work together at all because we're both in the real estate world. And then we would naturally, you can't, like, I think when you have two hustlers, you can't help but help each other. So then we kind of start working together behind the scenes. We were like each other's secret little employees. And then before you know it, now we've become more and more integrated. We still very much have all of our own things that we do. But yeah, we get to do a lot of the coaching together, which has been cool because he is somebody who, and I mean this truly, I think that our skill sets are so incredibly complementary of one another. Like I am extremely good at the marketing side and like the strategy. And at the same time, we can play like trading off roles of that visionary and integrator. Like we kind of bounce back and forth. I would say he's a lot more chaotic than I am. I'm a lot more of the like structured and here's how it's going to look. But having that kind of dynamic makes it really fun. So yeah, he's a wizard when it comes to like coaching on sales and conversion and prospecting and investing and all these things. So being able to call in somebody like that just off the bat, and he has to do it because otherwise dinner is not being served. But it's been fun. It makes it really enjoyable.
That's amazing. Now, about you, Tessa, the neighborhood. Break this down. I think you said you had your 1,000th client. Wait,
Yeah.
just crossed 1,000 agents?
Yes. Yeah.
Come on now.
Yeah, it's so cool. So I started this free community on School, which is a really awesome platform, and launched it not really knowing what was going to happen. But I was like, I just know I value community. I've gotten a lot out of community. There definitely are some other really cool real estate communities that already exist, many of which I'm great friends with and a big player in. But like, I wanted to cultivate something myself that I could curate and I could share my knowledge and I could like bring in the people that really inspire me and try to pour some of my wisdom back into the industry as well. So I launched this community and didn't really know what to expect. And as with everything, you know, when you start something new and it's like, all right, we got 50 members. Woo. It's like, I always go back to the phrase that embarrassment is the cost of entry. And whenever something's new and small, it feels a little embarrassing. And so, like, to be crossing our 1,000 members is a huge accomplishment. And I always have to sit and think like, wow, 1,000 people in a room is a ton of people. That's a big accomplishment. But then there's the other side of me still that's like, but you could have 50,000. Like, why isn't there more? And so it's kind of the balance of like being really grateful for every person there, every soul there, but also the moment that you're in and the season that you're in, and also wanting it to be a million times bigger than it is. But I'm pumped to have 1,000 people. It feels like a huge accomplishment.
Walk me through. What does it look like in there? Like, who's the target, audience? Who should
Yeah.
be in the community?
To be honest, I think the ideal person is an agent who is like feeling lost, which on my podcast, I have a real estate agent focused podcast and I talk about it. And I say my tagline is, we teach you what real estate school didn't. And I think that's also kind of the motto of the neighborhood, because if anyone on here has got their real estate license, you know that that test teaches you nothing about being a real estate agent. It teaches you
Hold
like,
up, Tessa. All the real estate agents are super smart. They know everything.
I mean, it's rough out there. It's crazy. And as I explained in some of my early deals, like you have no clue what's going to happen at any given point. I think the perfect person is just somebody who's feeling either wanting to connect with people who genuinely like will pour into them and answer their questions and be there for them, but also that newer agent who's like, I need a freaking blueprint. Like I need somebody to tell me, hey, if you do these 3 things, this will get you a result. Because there's almost so many ways to be successful in real estate that agents often try doing 50 of them at one time, and they're doing all 50 of them not super well because you're not pouring your time, effort, and attention towards them. And then they feel like a failure. And so the goal is to really simplify it. So there's like courses, there's trainings, there's all kinds of cool stuff in there, but it's really about just being able to connect people who need that extra like blueprint or guidebook of what should I be doing.
What's the number one thing that you see real estate agents doing wrong right now?
Well, all of them think they're doing social media wrong, but really their biggest problem is consistency and like time management. I can't tell you how messed up it is, but again, it's because most realtors, real estate is like their first experience of entrepreneurship. They probably came from a previous career and you've never really experienced something where no one's telling you what to do every day, much less a job where you're not getting paid for the work you did until 30 or more days later. So it's a really new concept for people. And I think just like figuring out how to manage your time, effort, and energy and what actually is going to bring dollars in the door is what most people struggle with.
All right. I didn't prep you for this, but you're the experts. Hoping you're ready.
Okay.
Give me like 2 gold nuggets for social media that real estate agents should implement today.
Okay. First one is, as an agent, this is agent specific, right? Okay. As a real estate agent, ask yourself what you love about where you live. And that should be probably your next 10 pieces of content. because if you live somewhere, even if you actually hate it, there's got to be something you love about it. You could even make a comedy spin on it and you're like, I low-key hate Phoenix, but here are the things that make it okay for me. And those could be your next 10 pieces of content. It's a series where you're like highlighting it. I think we overcomplicate coming up with ideas. It's like, if you enjoy something, other people will. They'll find that relatable, so share that. So that's nugget number 1. And nugget number 2 is honestly repost old content. I go back and I scroll back usually like, and it does, this obviously won't apply to absolutely every post, but I will go back and look at my stuff from 3 months or 6 months ago, and I'll see what performed well. And I will repost sometimes exactly the same post, like literally duplicate it verbatim. Sometimes I'll change it up a little bit, tweak something, but like that's the other thing is reuse the heck out of it, because probably 10% of your audience is seeing your content at any given time. And then that 10%, you've also got to think their attention span is like 3 seconds. So it's not landing. So just repurpose, repost, reuse. There's really no limit to how much you can do that. It saves you time, makes things so much easier.
You were ready. Okay. You must do this for real, Tessa.
I sit on a throne of golden nuggets, just ready to go at all times.
I love it. I want to ask you this selfishly.
Okay.
So when you post and let's say it doesn't hit and you're like, damn, like I usually get this amount of likes, this amount of views, and this doesn't even look like it's part of my account. Do you delete it or do you just let it ride and good luck for
Oh
next
yeah,
time?
so pretty much every time I post, I feel that way. And no, I never delete it. I do hide my likes just because I'm like, I don't think that metric matters much anymore. And frankly, yeah, it sucks. I hate seeing like that likes are low. But even if it's like views are low, whatever, one thing I found is like the longer you let something ride, sometimes like I've had posts where it's tanking for a month and then all of the sudden it gets like 5,000, 10,000, and it's starting to like catch this weird momentum out of nowhere. So I leave everything up, and then again sometimes I'll repurpose it. Maybe I'll pay attention to the fact that it was the hook that was wrong and that's why it didn't perform very well. So that's what I redo. But yeah, no, I'm a big fan of leaving it up, because also circling it back to earlier in this podcast, like at the very least, it's a reference point. I pull up my old videos someday and I'm like, oh, those are brutal watches. But the fact that I still have them and I still have them up, it's a testament to the fact that you've been in the game and you're still doing it, and you'll see what works and what doesn't.
So true. Last question on content. On a podcast clip, what would you recommend is the best way to, let's say, edit, or like even for our podcast, for example? I'm going to clip a couple of these up, make them into reels. Is there any techniques or, things that I have to tell my editor when they do that?
Honestly, I'm still learning that game myself. I think, yeah, finding like a good clip that gives somebody like an intrigue of what else they could learn. And then I always link it to the full episode. So, like using ManyChat, for example, I'll have like whatever is the best, most powerful clip that's like talking about something that's intriguing that people want to learn, which I hopefully gave you some good clips in there. And then set that up so they comment like the person's name or they comment link and it sends them to the YouTube or something like that. That's what's performed best for me, is, or wherever I guess you want to drive that traffic, but trying to give them that full form content somewhere else, or a tangible takeaway. It could be like, hey, on this episode, we talked about this, this, and this, and it ties into, some lead magnet you have that's like best ways to get the most out of networking with people. And that's what they're commenting for. So I use like ManyChat and adding value on pretty much any post that I share. And then they perform much better.
Well, I don't do that, so I'm going to start. Tessa, Growth House, our motto is you become who you surround yourself with, and I'm honored to hang out with you today, and
Yeah.
obviously Ramon quite often. So just want to say I appreciate you being on here, and people are going to reach out. They're going to, slide in the DMs, probably want to ask you questions, but no one's going to say, hey, can I pick your brain? If they do, I don't know them, not from Growth House.
I'm
So
going to
we want to
flip them out of here.
yeah, just block them. But we want to lead with some kind of value. So what's something that someone who reaches out to you before they ask you for something or have you answer a question, what, it could be small, it could be big, what kind of value can they provide for you?
Well, hey, I've heard every person knows at least one realtor in their circle of friends. So the biggest piece of value that like somebody could do for me is introduce me to a realtor or share my page with a realtor, because I share a ton of value for agents on, so especially on Instagram. So, like, that would be the biggest help that anyone can do for me. And hopefully, they get rewarded with the value that I share on there.
Love it. Yeah, if you're a real estate agent and you're not following Tessa Bella, you better follow right now. Tessa, it's been fun. I
Yes.
really
Thank you so much
appreciate
for
you.
having me.
Absolutely. Jesse Ray, Tessa Bella, Tessa Bay. Is that
There you go.
right?
Yep.
Jesse Ray, Tessa Bay, Growth House Podcast. We're out.